Thomas is a tank engine who lives at a big station on the island of Sodor.
These were the words that sparked a legacy. The introduction to a story that would capture the hearts of thousands, if not millions of viewers worldwide, both young and older. In 1984, on the 9th of October, the very first episode of Thomas the Tank Engine would air, and from that point on, the show would puff and chug and wheesh along to global success, although it wasn't an entirely original production. Though it's common knowledge now, it's still important to point out that the television programme was an adaptation of the Railway series books by the Reverend Wilbert Awdry. Every episode here is based on one of his stories, with the exception of Thomas's Christmas Party, which was written by Britt Allcroft and David Mitton from the show. It was later adapted back into the books though, so I guess it came full circle. The episodes were largely faithful to the original stories, for better or worse, and these stories set the foundation for the whole series. In this video, I'm going to be taking a look at this first series of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, and talk about the things I like about it, as well as the things I don't. In other words, it's a review. I've made a few videos on Thomas by now, including ranking every series, and reviews of individual episodes, as well as other things, but this is the first time I'm actually dedicating a whole video to just one series itself. Before we get started, be sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment telling me what you think, because feedback is good, and then if it does well I can come back next time to do series 2 as well. Okay, let's get on with the review. Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends is essentially a window to another world, showcasing the day-to-day runnings of the fictional island of Sodor. Though the series is named after him and he's the only engine in the intro, Thomas himself is only the star of just under half of the 26 episodes. He does get the most stories that revolve mainly around one character when compared to the others, which is a reasonable case for why he's the main character, but 15 of the 26 episodes are not about him. This is good for showing how equally important all the other engines are. Based on the episodes here, they could have easily just called the show the Railway series and it would fit just fine, I think. But of course, marketing. Through the stories, we see the characters getting up to things that you'd expect to see on a working railway, such as shunting, pulling an express, doing pilot duties, and the usage of extra equipment such as breakdown trains and snowplows. In addition to the jobs, there's also plenty of accidents too, such as derailments and crashes, which showcase the dangers that come with working on a railway. This helps sell the world of Sodor as a living, steaming environment that's a nice, if simplified, parallel to the real world, and it's mostly thanks to the source material coming from enthusiasts such as Wilbert Awdry, but also the dedicated work of the production team who brought it to life. Not only do the engines have their bases in real-life vehicles, but many of the stories do too. Awdry drew from real inspiration when writing his stories, and it can be a fascinating rabbit hole to go down into. Down the Mine in particular was interesting to me, because the real event was just so bizarre. A sinkhole really did swallow up the entire engine, and it's still down there today. There's been plenty of speculation about how far down it is, and I think people have even tried to see if they can dig it up, but since there's an active railway there, it's a bit difficult. I just think it would be spooky to ride over there on a modern train thinking, whoa, right below me there's an engine. Toby and the Stout Gentleman is a really melancholy story, and that's helped by the fact that it mirrored what was really happening to railways in real life, when roads did take up so much business away from the rails. Having real-world events shape the stories makes them much more impactful, I think, and it helps ground the series even more. There's no engines doing somersaults off the tracks or making silly noises or anything like that. It's all reasonable. Hopefully, this would actually get kids interested to learn more, since the show itself is fictional, but there's enough real-world stuff sprinkled in to make them want to delve deeper into where it came from, hopefully. The events alone wouldn't really make for a terribly exciting show for kids though. Just seeing engines shunting trucks and having accidents wouldn't be so compelling after a while, which is why it's such a good thing that the characters in Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends are lively and awesome. The cast would of course be expanded as the show progressed, but Series 1 alone has a wonderful selection of engines of different types and humans to accompany them. These engines come in all shapes and sizes. You've got your standard tank engines, saddle tanks, big tender ones, trams, and that's about it for Series 1. There's a fairly good representation of different types here, and this is taken even further with the different colours, faces, and most of all, their personalities. Each of these characters has their own distinct personality that sets them apart and makes them more memorable in their own way, and stories usually revolve around these characters having to deal with whatever the problem is in a way that only that character can. If you were to swap the engines around in most of these stories, then the outcomes would probably be very different. Thomas is cheeky and has aspirations above his dome to get out there and do more than shunting. Gordon is big and proud and a bit of a show-off. Edward is old but hard-working and the most reasonable one of them all. Henry means well but suffers from problems that ail his work. Percy is young and naive. James is vain and loves to boast about his paint. And Toby is sensible, but he can have a bit of a short fuse when annoyed. An aspect I really enjoy about the characters is that they don't always get along. They bicker, make rude comments towards each other, and complain about things, like co-workers and also likely engines on an actual railway really would. Some of the best interactions even come from them having a pop at each other.
You're too fat, you need exercise. That's why you once needed bootlaces to be ready, I suppose. It's ditch water.
Of course, this is just how the characters start off, and over the course of the series they do have their arcs and grow. Some of them have more growth than others, but at least all of them get their time to shine. It's not only the vehicles that inhabit the island of Sodor, of course. There's plenty of humans too. The main one is obviously the Fat Controller, who is a bossy and no-nonsense type, but also knows how to treat his engines with respect when it's deserved. I always see people saying that the Fat Controller is this dictator type over some sort of authoritarian regime, where the engines are forced to work or he'll punish them, but I don't really see it that way. The guy genuinely does care about his engines, and he goes through all the effort of keeping them maintained, and reassures them when they're in a bad spot. We get to see the railway workers, although they're all unnamed, and there's also plenty of civilians like the nice Mrs. Kindly. The engines are definitely the focus, but it is good to see human characters, who are just as vital to running the island as the vehicles are. I've already spoken at length about how much I love the model work in this series throughout my other videos, but just in case you've not seen those, I'll go into it again here. Series 1's model work may seem a bit more basic compared to what came later, but it's still really good. There's a nice variety of buildings of different types, structures like bridges, rivers, and plenty of natural scenery. It's hard to explain, but it feels like everything has this sort of greyish tone to it. There's plenty of other colours too, but everything has this sort of greyish look that makes Series 1 in particular look a bit old-fashioned. There's good use of different weather effects such as snow in a few episodes, and even rain, which I'm not entirely sure is actual water or not, but it's only on screen for a few seconds and it's convincing enough. Most of the skyboxes consist of a sunny day with some clouds, but there are some really nice sunset and night ones too. Some of the camera angles here also use to great effect, especially the low down ones, which make the engines look way bigger than the little models than they actually are. The absolute standout episode when it comes to production is of course the Flying Kipper, which features incredible work throughout. There's a busy harbour at the start, illuminated at night by all the light from the equipment, plenty of ambience of people working on the honks of machinery, then the sunrise gradually illuminating the scenery throughout as the morning goes on, the uplifting music that quickly turns dramatic, and of course the devastating crash that we get to witness in full. This episode almost functioned like a sizzle reel itself, just to show what the team was capable of. The narration provided by Ringo Starr is warm and friendly, really calming to listen to, as if he's reading this as a bedtime story to you. Unfortunately, this also means that he can come across as sounding a bit flat and dull sometimes. I think he was a very good fit and most of his narrations were really good and engaging, but he definitely has his moments of monotone delivery that maybe could have used another take. He mostly uses the same voice when speaking as different characters, except for Gordon was a bit of a lower tone.
What has happened to me? Asked Gordon. I feel so weak.
Now, this may be a bit controversial, but I think one aspect of the books that didn't translate so well to the show was the repetitive lines. I'm talking about those times when one of the engines or rolling stock has a line of dialogue that's repeated multiple times for extra effect, such as Edward saying, "I will do it, I will do it, I will do it." Written on a page, these are fine, and can be read or spoken out loud by the storyteller at their own leisure. It comes from Audrey's interpretation of the puffs and wheezes of working engines as them actually talking to each other. This is just a personal preference, but I don't think it sounds quite right a few of the times when Ringo does it. In cases where it's slowed down like Gordon struggling up the hill, it's fine, but when it's a bit quicker or in a situation where I don't think it's really needed, it just sounds a bit weird to me.
Come along, we're rather late. Oh, come along, we're rather late.
Again, just a preference thing. The music was composed by the duo of Mike O'Donnell and Junior Campbell, And wow, did they make a good first impression. Every character has their own unique theme that plays when they're the focus, and this of course works wonders in getting you familiarised with them and fitting so well. Thomas's theme is of course the main theme. Gordon's is proper fancy sounding, like something you'd probably hear on a show about antiques. Edward's is cheerful and busy, and James has his amazing jazzy tune that is an absolute bop. Not only does everyone have their own theme, but there's also variations of them to suit different situations, like Thomas's theme having a Christmas version, or Henry's theme being slowed down into a sad version. This helps keep things consistent and familiarised with the different elements of the show. Of course, it's not only the characters that get themes, there's also the musical tracks that accompany events like the breakdown theme being used when characters are struggling with something or getting rescued, and the amazing runaway theme that plays during chase sequences. These are used to great effect, emphasising the danger and drama of what's happening, and makes the runaway scenes especially more intense. Something this, and then Series 2 after it does, is including the theme song at the end of a story to lead into the credits. Episodes end with the narration coming to a stop, but footage continuing to play for a few seconds, while the show's main theme starts over it, which then transitions really nicely into the credits.
All James could do was watch Toby as he ran off happily with the news.
I really like this, especially when it's an ending that's directly setting up the next episode. It leaves you excited for what's to come, kind of like a less intense version of how EastEnders does it.
He wondered if he would ever be allowed to pull trains again. But I think he deserved his punishment. Don't you?
The show would stop doing this after Series 2 though. While the music is fantastic, I think it's also worth talking about the series' lack of music. Throughout pretty much every series of Thomas, there's various tracks playing throughout the episodes while things are happening. Fairly standard kids show stuff, I know. It's a way of keeping them engaged in that. Just look at how Funimation dubbed Dragon Ball Z in the 90s. Every scene had music over it. Kids have short attention spans, I guess. Series 1 does things a bit differently there, and I find it really interesting. There's many scenes where there's absolutely no narration or music at all. The only sounds you can hear are the machinery of the engines or the ambience around them. I'm talking about things like clanking and puffing, steam blowing, and birds chirping. Here's an example. I think it really goes a long way in showing how important good audio design can be, since these quieter moments really help you get immersed in this world. If you really hear in this moment, then these are the sort of things that you'd be hearing. It's like you're actually there, and it's something unique to this series. If you were to listen to the noises these engines were actually making on set, then it would sound something like this probably. Although there was clearly a lot of effort put into the production of Thomas, there were occasional slip-ups and problems that you may notice while watching. These are referred to as goofs by the community, and they can actually be quite funny. Things like visible studio equipment, wrong faces, crew members on screen and more are just errors that crop up while filming, and I don't think they really bring the show down or anything, they're just fun to look out for. Check out my video on my favourite Thomas goofs for more of that. For the most part, I think the stories flow quite well, and we do get a chance to see each character grow a bit. But unfortunately, there are a few things that got muddled up in the adaptation of the books just a bit, in my opinion. For example, the engines going on strike in trouble in the shed. Gordon, Henry and James all go on strike, due to the apparent way they've been treated and the mishaps that have happened to them, in addition to being unhappy that they have more work to do without Thomas. The book Troublesome Engines is set up with each of them having some sort of event that eventually results in them coming together to strike. Henry has the incident with the elephant in the tunnel, Gordon gets embarrassed going backwards, and James spins around on a turntable. These events are explicitly mentioned as being inciting incidents that feed into the trouble in the shed events. Now, Henry and the Elephant would not be adapted into television until the 4th series, which leaves his role in the strike feeling a bit unjustified to me. Even as a kid, before I even read the books, I always wondered why Henry seemed to be so on board with the strike, since nothing that bad really happened to him. I guess Gordon just did a really good job of convincing him. I wasn't even born while they were making this, so I can't claim to know why they did it this way, but they must have had their reasons. Personally, I would have put Henry and the Elephant in there and taking out one of the other episodes, like, I don't know, Thomas Goes Fishing maybe. Neither of these are glaring issues that make me downright hate the episodes or anything, but there is a good example of how cutting something out can lead to issues later in regards to storytelling. I just think that, personally, I would have preferred Series 1 to be set out a bit differently. Things happen a bit too close together for my liking, and it makes it seem as if everything happens within the space of like 1 week or something. There's not really much of a timescale shown here, which is something I think the entire series has. It's not a massive problem, it's just something I noticed. For example, Henry is let out of the tunnel the very episode after he's locked up. James gets 3 episodes in a row, and the cliffhanger of Toby's new life being resolved in the following episode. These, coupled with what I just mentioned regarding Trouble in the Shed, makes me wish that the order of these episodes had been a bit different to what we got. Who knows, maybe I'll have to make a nice fan edit of them that chops them up nicely to fit better. The stories in the books were close to one another in the way they are, because, I assume, they could be read one story a night. A parent could read the sad story of Henry one evening, and then save the next story for tomorrow, which gets the kid wanting to know more but having to wait. I would have spaced them out differently with stuff happening in between to make the payoff better. Having an episode or two take place while Henry's in the tunnel would make his punishment seem to last way longer, and in return, his release would feel much more liberating. This is something I find difficult to criticise because it's entirely a preference thing, and I'm also not a young child. I'm just talking about how I, personally, would prefer it for storytelling reasons. I don't know, maybe having the episodes be played so close together was better for kids who had less attention spans, since they may forget what happened since the last time. It's a good way of retaining their attention then. There's also the fact that these episodes may not have aired together in such a way, so a wait of a day or two in between episodes would make it seem a lot more drawn out than watching them back to back. I don't think they were considering people binging the entire thing in one sitting when they were putting this thing together. Maybe this problem only exists because this is the way I watch the show now. I'm not a writer, nor am I a director, so I can't really say whether or not my way is better, and I haven't really heard anyone else bring this up, so maybe it's just a purely me problem. Either way, we all love this show regardless, so it's not a huge issue. It's more of a giant nitpick than anything, but hey, it's a review, and this was something I was thinking about. Series 1 is a fantastic start to the franchise that lay the groundwork for years to come. There's a good mix of stories that are well told and well presented, and it's engaging enough to keep you interested. Due to its grounded subject matter and often slow narration, I'm not too sure if it would sit well with the Cocomelon, TikTok and tablet-obsessed kids of this generation, but I'm happy to be wrong about that, and I hope that adults like me who enjoyed the classic series as kids have had some success in getting their own kids into it as well. That being said, I wouldn't want to force kids to watch stuff they have no interest in. Different generations like different things. Maybe if Mattel does a Series 1 remix where the Fat Control is an influencer, and the engines travel at 1,000 miles per hour while crap music plays, it would be a big hit. I don't really think Series 1 does anything better than later series, except for the atmospheric quiet scenes. But that's not really a problem with the series itself, it's just an example of how much things improved as it went along. Some of the stories could have been laid out a bit better, and this unfortunately continued in the next series, but I think the selection they went with is good, since every character gets an appropriate introductory episode, and it's pretty cohesive as it is. If you've seen my ranking video, then you'll remember that Series 1 wasn't my favourite, that was Series 2, but I still enjoy and respect the first one for what it did, and the great way it established this universe. It may not be the best, but it certainly paved the way for the rest, and I'm always happy to revisit it. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this review, and maybe even got inspired to think about Series 1 in ways you hadn't before. I probably didn't cover entirely new ground, since there's already reviews out there from other channels, but I thought I'd say my thoughts on it too, because I like talking about it. Be sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment about what you thought of the review, as well as your own thoughts of Series 1. Have a lovely day.